Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Red Hot Talk. There's another week, another topic, and you're seeing the title and the thumbnail. We're going to talking something rather interesting today, Rod. And yeah, we are going to have a little bit of a discussion here about DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. I know that everybody, would probably know. At least I know what you guys are supporting, and but old geeks like myself. Not so about Rod's too young for that. And then old geeks like old geeks like myself who grew up with SLRs and DSLRs, and I do feel that there is still a place for DSLRs, and but we're gonna have a little discussion about it. We have a few points listed, so we're gonna go through one by one with Rod, and hopefully you guys can join in. And please continue to flood in your comments and your ideas about both systems, and the DSLRs and mirrorless. Which one would you prefer? Which one you feel that is going, or which one is the future? and so just keep the comment coming. We're gonna pick up some of them as we go along. So we just start today's topic by having the first discussion. I think is going to be very interesting. Is the big one? I think it's the big one. Anyways, probably the biggest one of all is the viewfinders. And Rod, and so I asked you a question now. Do you prefer an OVF, which is optical viewfinder, or an EVF, electronic viewfinder?
So I'm going to have to come off the fence, aren't I, and say it's OVF. And I'll explain why. For a long time, most of the people I work with in my job were saying DSLRs are dead. With an EVF, you get to see a representation of what the camera will capture, which is true. However, when I'm taking pictures, I find it a much more natural experience to swap from my naked eye view of the scene, look in the viewfinder, and there's my naked eye view still. It's more fluid for me. Right. If I use an OVF, I feel like I'm more directly connected with the thing I'm photographing. Whereas with an EVF, I feel like a little bit removed. It's already been digitized. I'm not really taking photographs in quite the same way anymore. It probably sounds like a very tiny point, and maybe it is. But for me, an OVF is a more natural way to see and compose photographs.
Right. And instantly we got one comment from Carl. So before it gets busy, the big problem with EVF, I get migraines after using them. Is it worth going back to DSLR? Well, you go ahead, Rod. You can answer this one.
Well, I've been thinking about this ahead of today's chat, and I think rather than saying DSLR versus mirrorless, which is best, I think you have to figure out what you can most give up. Because if you swap to mirrorless from a DSLR, there are some things you're going to give up. You might say the balance is more in favor of mirrorless. I might even agree with you, but I think it's worth saying that there are some things that mirrorless cameras do differently, and to some people not as nicely. OVS might be one of them, but to Carl, I would say be careful what you go back to, because if you spend any time at all with mirrorless cameras, you get used to certain things that you lose with the DSLR. You get used to cameras that don't weigh as much as a house brick, for example, and cameras you can hold in one hand without getting a sprain. You get used to stabilization that is effective. You get used to autofocus that's the same whether you're using the viewfinder or the LCD. It's another thing we'll come on to later on, I think. So I would say you've got to decide. For me, having an OVF is such a nice thing that I wouldn't say I would sacrifice everything that mirrorless cameras do to get it. But very often I find myself going back to a DSLR and thinking, I like this.
Yes.
So I've got both. I can't, I'm luckily I don't have to choose and have one or the other. I've got both. But there are times when I've picked
Yep.
up a DSLR and thought it's almost like coming home in a funny kind of way, because this is how you remember your photography began.
Yep.
So
Absolutely. I think I kind of have the same feeling as well. And uh, I think professionally speaking, I now prefer EVF more than OVF. But personally, I prefer OVF for many reasons. And first of all, is clarity, and then you really can't beat the clarity from a good OVF. And because it resolves as much as your eyes can see. It's not much about resolutions on the backlit screen inside the housing, and to be quite honest, I much prefer that feeling of looking through the mirror than actually being projected. You're literally looking at a very tiny televisions inside a housing, and if you're looking at a prolonged period, it does actually start to hurt your eye a little bit if you like kind of keep on looking at something literally like kind of shining in your eyes constantly, and it does hurt. However, having said that, and you do kind of get used to it, but if, the thing is, the reason why I said about professionally is because, like you said, mentioned already, Rod, about stabilization, and I now find it really difficult to go back to a non-stabilized camera, which means and looking through the viewfinder, and I do find it really difficult and to see whether I'm well, actually maybe I'm getting my hands shaking more than before, but the whole experience is very different now. And secondly, I think that we, instead of relying on the camera meter indicator on the camera viewfinder to tell you whether you're overexposed or underexposed, and you now can basically what you see through the EVF, and that is very handy from a professional point of view. So that means you are more likely to nail the exposure correctly than before, and because you never know how the system works before, you have to be very familiar with the camera's metering system to have that confidence when you're shooting. And quite often that you're under by a third of the stop, even half a stop, is not uncommon for many photographers in the past who using DSLRs, and because the metering system, no matter how sophisticated they are, you just can't judge sometimes. And only from experience, so you would say, okay, like in this sort of situation, you overexpose it by half a stop, that would compensate it. And then but then again, you really depending on how much you understand the camera itself and the exposure system, how it works. But now EVF completely eradicated that problem, because you are literally seeing what your final image is through the EVF, and that is definitely a plus for me. So I can see some more people actually talking about the EVF. So Bob actually prefer the EVF, much faster, easier, and needs to be more responsive. Oh, that's another thing we haven't talked about, Rod. It's about lag. OVF has no lag, right? It's real time.
well, this is the thing that always interests me with sports photography and speaking to pro sports photographers. You would imagine, wouldn't you, that a DSLR with a mirror flapping up and down would have more viewfinder blackout than a mirrorless camera, or an EVF, I should say. But it's usually not the case, because even though the mirror is up half the time you're shooting in burst mode, the other half of the time there's no lag. And the net result is that compared to most, I mean, there are a few high-end mirrorless cameras where the EVF has no lag. Sometimes you have to reduce the maximum frame rate to get that, but usually there is some lag. So a DSLR, even though it's got this mirror going up and down 10 times a second, you still get less lag than you do with the average mirrorless camera. I mean, if you've ever tried doing a panning shot of a fast-moving subject with an EVF on a camera that's kind of mid-range, maybe not something like a Sony A9, say, it's almost impossible, because the image in the EVF is always like a quarter of a second or a tenth of a second behind what's in front of the camera. And so it becomes much harder to judge that kind of shot. So I think that's interesting. I think though that if we can get past the whole lag business, and there are
Yeah,
many cameras now that are quite good at that, it's a different story. But I think that this idea of exposure is interesting. I've got a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, the mirrorless cameras I've used, I wouldn't trust the screens in a viewfinder to tell me whether the shadows or highlights were clipping, because
yeah,
they're not
yeah,
that sophisticated. But you can just turn on histogram, can't you, and do it
yes,
that way. Um, but the other thing I would say is that with a DSLR, you don't get that, but they can play pictures back. So it takes a moment longer, but you can just take a picture, look at it and say, oh, I messed that up, and
yeah,
shoot it
yeah.
again. It's not as quick. It's an extra step. It's not ideal, but I don't think it's fair to say that you have to hope for the best, because you
Yeah.
can see straight away if it's not worked.
Yeah, I think so. And another thing that I think you mentioned it and is quite well, um, uh, obvious to many photographers that the technologies behind an EVF plays a big role in how accurate the representation is. And despite what we said about the mirrorless cameras are more or less the same in the last few years, and in terms of image quality, but the technology on the viewfinder has improved dramatically over the last few years,
Massively.
and that has a big plays a big part of everyday life in terms of photographer's life, and is how true it represents the world that you're seeing. And like you said, even with the latest and the greatest EVF at the moment, you still can't replicate the same thing as what an OVF is at the moment. I don't think so. And like you said as well, if even within the same company, I mean, I have many Olympus cameras here, so I mean, I look through the viewfinder, every single one of them, they all look slightly different from one another.
Yeah.
So like the only way I can tell, like you said, whether I know it's clipping the shadow or the highlight is to look at the histogram. And without that, I have no idea sometimes whether the dark areas is completely blacked out, like lost all the details and informations, or vice versa, the highlight. And without looking at the actual histogram, I have no idea, because the dynamic range on the actual viewfinder or the LCD screens are not HDR, and they haven't got the same dynamic range. They haven't got that technology yet to actually represent the whole entire spectrum of different light intensities and colors. So no matter how good they are, it just can't beat an OVF, because OVF is literally just a mirror, like you're seeing through a window, so you are looking at everything your eyes can basically decode.
I think as well, you can look through an OVF and you know your camera, you know
Yeah.
what the sensor can record. And especially if shooting in RAW, even if you shoot in RAW, you have to trust your sensor, because even the histogram is only a representation of what the camera,
Yeah,
it's a camera JPEG preview, isn't it? Basically,
it
it's
is.
not showing you what's in a RAW file. But here's me going on about how wonderful OVFs are. There are downsides too, and I think it comes back to this thing of what you can most afford to give up. So I know, for example, Jim, that you like your retro lenses, don't you?
I do like my retro
And
lenses.
so do I. But manual focus on a DSLR, forget it. Forget it.
Yeah,
I've got a bunch of old Pentax lenses, and I have a Pentax DSLR, but they don't go well together.
excuse me.
But
Yeah.
I have got a Sony mirrorless camera with a Pentax screw and a Pentax bayonet adapter. And my Pentax lenses are brilliant on that, because, first of all, it doesn't matter that they have to use them at f5.6 or f8, because the EVF has got auto gain in it. The image
Yeah.
is still bright.
Yes.
And if I need to check focus, I can just press a button, zoom in, check focus, and away I go. I can't do that on a DSLR. So paradoxically, all my old favorite DSLR lenses, they work better on mirrorless cameras today. So
That is so true. And actually, I have to mimic what you just said. And I find myself use manual focusing lenses actually more these days with mirrorless cameras than ever before. I have rangefinder Leicas film cameras, so they were manual focus. I have some old OM1 film cameras, not digital OM1 film cameras, and I have other Nikon and Pentax SLRs in my closets, and they're all manual focusing lenses. And I mean, as you know, obviously film cost is one thing, but like even when film wasn't that expensive, and then I still didn't use as much as now, so I just adapt a lot of those lenses on my mirrorless cameras, and I find it a lot easier to nail focus because of the features that you mentioned. You can punch in magnified,
Yeah.
you can check the focus. Forget about peaking. I still don't trust about peaking at all, and but I do magnify, checking the focus, and but yeah, it's great. You know, I think that it's a great way to reuse a lot of these older lenses, especially if you treasure all these old characters from the lenses. And I know that many of you know that I do like those old vintage looks, you know, in photography, because I do think that they are brilliant. Yeah, so that is good, and I can see quite a few people who have split opinions from the from comments. I can see people, half of them going EVF, half of them going OVF. So we got kind of like 50-50s.
Well, I think in fairness to mirrorless cameras, especially full frame ones, the adapters you can get today, you can put any lens on a mirrorless body.
Yeah.
And mirrorless cameras have brought old lenses back into circulation in a way that DSLRs never could. So
And
shout,
you know what,
shout to mirrorless there.
that is what drive all these old cheap lenses up now, isn't it? Like, I used to be able to get them for £5, £10, and now they're going for like 50, 60 minimum.
I'm a big fan of Laowa lenses, but they're on manual focus. No way I'll try and use them on the DSLR. I don't use them on a mirrorless camera because you can't get the precision of focus, manual focus, with the DSLR.
Yeah.
The viewfinders have evolved. They've got smaller. They don't have the focusing aids. Lenses have got a little bit slower, strangely, but they have. So with OVF versus EVF, pros and cons. You have to decide what you can most live with and most live without.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and just before we move on to the next topic, and welcome everybody. I think I see more people joining now. And David, you are new to our live chat, so welcome to our live chat. And sorry about that. I'm coughing a little bit because I actually have a flu at the moment, so it's not the greatest shape. And you may hear me coughing a little bit more later. But anyway, let's go on to the second point here between the DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. So far, we can see people's reactions that we kind of have a draw at the moment, because 50-50 on the OVF and EVF's debate. And next is battery life. Very good. I think that we should all agree that DSLR's battery life is way, way, way better than mirrorless cameras. You can't beat that. You just can't beat that.
No. I used to work on a Nikon magazine where we'd go out for a day shooting, and as long as I'd charge the battery, that'd be fine. But now I've got mirrorless cameras. My worst offender has got to be my old Sony A7R2, which has got Sony's previous generation battery tech, and that's probably good for a couple of hundred shots. So I've got four batteries, and I probably do need to take them all. So that's a little bit irritating. But I recently used a Nikon D800 for not very much money, and I've been playing with it endlessly ever since I got it. And I've only charged the battery once, and I'm thinking, what's going on? It's like I'd forgotten you could have cameras where you didn't have to have spare batteries or charge them up halfway through the day or carry a power bank.
Well, even if you look back in the old days of SLRs, like this film SLRs, you put a battery in these things. It lasts for years.
I know.
It literally lasts for years.
People can be complaining about their Pentax ME Supers that they've had to put new batteries in. Say, but I put new batteries last year. I've had to do it again. But
exactly.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and like you said, the DSLRs, and when I had my 5Ds, the Canon 5Ds and the EOS 1, and EOS 1's got a big battery pack as well, one of the big chunky ones. They last for, like, seriously, you charge it once, you literally don't have to charge for the whole week. It lasts through the entire week. Obviously it's different for sports photography, perhaps, because they shoot a lot more on the day. But for my type of photography, it literally lasts for the whole week. And even on the 5D, I find myself the battery, if I take it to a wedding, and all I need is probably a couple of batteries, and that's it. I don't need more than that. It's enough to cover the entire wedding in 2 batteries. And when I moved on to the EM1 Mark II at the time, and even the EM1 Mark II had the a bigger battery, and actually in terms of battery life, it's actually not bad at all. But still, I need at least 3 batteries, and also a charger ready. So basically, I keep circulating the whole battery from one another, and just to keep it going until the wedding finishes at the end of the day. So I would say 4 battery probably cover a wedding, and it's not uncommon in a mirrorless world. But if they're using something like what you just said about the was it A7R2?
A7R2, yeah.
If the battery only lasts for a couple of hundred shots, and that means I probably need about 6 to 7 batteries ready.
Well, you would, yeah. And I think it's all. And people say, "Oh, just get more batteries." That's all well and good, but it's the interruption.
It is, yes.
And the organisation, you've got to figure out which batteries are charged and which aren't.
Yeah.
You've got to carry them, and they're not cheap.
No.
I mean, you can get third-party batteries, which are probably not worth using because they don't do the job you bought them for. They probably cost half as much and last half as long if they don't catch fire.
Yeah.
So I would guess you probably buy the proper Olympus batteries, Jimmy. Is that
I
right?
do.
Or...
I mean, I always tell
I've
people.
used Haino batteries before, but
which one that I used recently? It's not bad at all. It's a third party for the OM1, and during my test, and it seems to last as long as the original. But like you said, I had bad experiences before, and using third party batteries, and I tried many different brands, and none of them last as long as the original. Even though they might be half the price, but if they only last half as much, then you must well get the original.
I think sometimes the camera makers do a bit of electronic trickery to make sure that only their batteries deliver.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that there are some sort of chipsets within each battery, so they communicate each other, so that the power management itself is a lot better than the actual just the battery itself. And that's probably why. And how many of you have experience in batteries, and let us know as well, because we would like to hear from you about your experience in batteries and third-party batteries. If you've got any good suggestions, and maybe share within the community, then everybody can have a try about different battery brands. And so far, for all my pro jobs, I tend to use the original batteries, and simply because I know they're reliable, I know they hold the charge, and I know that they last as long as what the manufacturer claim, usually, if not longer. So that's the reason why I opt for original batteries. But when I first got the EM5, the very first one, I remember I had a whole bunch of third-party batteries lying around, and because at the time I wasn't really using the EM5 as a professional tool, I just take it as a travel camera, and so I don't really care about battery life too much, and I can afford to have interruptions, like what Rod said. In a pro environment, you really don't want to suddenly stop and change while the moment is still happening, and that's definitely not a good thing to do.
Well, it doesn't look good, does it, in front of your client? Oh, hang on, I've just got to change my batteries. What?
Oh, I do that quite often, actually.
and I suppose I'm sure you must have a system.
Yeah.
But I've always found it quite tiresome trying to remember. Before you go out, you've got to make sure all your batteries are charged. You've got to remember which ones are charged and which aren't. Then when you're out, you've got to separate the empty ones from the fresh ones.
Yes.
It's not it's not straightforward.
It isn't. It isn't. Well, I have a system in place, and
I thought you would.
and I also have a new camera bag that I'm reviewing. So you guys should stay tuned for that. And the cool thing about this camera bag, it's a backpack actually. It has a compartment that for batteries, and the cool thing is it has a little kind of like a flap that you can turn. So basically it's green or red. So you can actually switch. So when you have an empty battery, put it in a pouch and turn it to red, so you know that one is empty. So that's a pretty cool system. But for me, without that bag, and what I tend to do is, these battery usually comes with a little transparent plastic case.
Yeah.
And it actually has a little window on the kind of the opening flap thing, and so what I do, I just basically flip the battery upside down, and then when I close it, so I know when the word is facing upwards, then I know that one's empty. I actually don't have one here. I wish I could show you. I just don't have the battery right here. Maybe next time. And so that's the system I use. So every time I flip the battery, I know that one is empty, and then just put it back to the back. I won't get it mixed up.
That's very organized. Do you know what? It reminds me of we did a chat a while ago about camera features we'd love to see. I've just thought of a battery feature.
Yeah,
I'd love to see. Do you remember? Anyone remember on Duracells? You could pinch the top and the bottom contact between
yeah,
fingers.
yeah.
And have a little bar showing the power. I've got power banks where you can press a button and a little row of LEDs lights up. Be nice if batteries, rechargeable batteries, had the same thing. Just a power level indicator. I mean, heaven knows they cost enough. I'm sure they can find a little bit of money to put a lamp in.
Funny you mentioned about Duracell. Do you notice that now they completely got rid of that features now? You know, the energy indicator. All the newer Duracells don't have that now. I don't know why they removed that.
That's because people were being too careful with the batteries. They want people to throw away new ones by mistake and buy some more.
Terrible. I love that feature. That's the only way I can tell whether the battery's full or not.
Yeah.
In fact, I actually have one right here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, that's it, right?
Jimmy, you've got everything there. You've got like a museum of technology.
I know. Oh, this one is empty. This one has got red here. Okay.
Why have you still got it?
I don't know.
Just to show us.
Like that's you said, I got everything here. And Dean also shared that same experience, and he said that they love his Olympus gear, but then I can crack out 1100 shots on the Canon 40D with the OEM 511A battery.
Yeah. That's the thing. That's one of the things we've lost, but I guess it goes with the territory. But yeah, I mean, you can get more batteries. It's not quite the same thing.
No, yeah.
And what those Olympus batteries? Do you mean what they're about £60 each or $60 wherever you're buying them?
No, I think they're about £70 now, $69.99. And
so if you get 4 of those, that's practically a lens.
It is. I mean, they are expensive, and don't get me wrong. Actually, most batteries these days, if you look at the prices, all the original batteries, they're all £60-70 each. And if you go for the bigger cameras, and they've got the bigger packs, and those are like over 100 each, and it's not uncommon. They are really expensive, and so like for those who are looking forward to getting new cameras, and you know, not just the camera you have to buy, you have to think about all these supporting accessories like getting extra batteries, extra chargers, and things. A lot of cameras like the OM1 and doesn't even come with charger nowadays, and so like you have to kind of factor the cost in as well to get an extra charger, extra batteries, and all sorts. I know many manufacturers are now pushing towards USB-C charging or even using PD power. So that means you can technically shoot with a USB cable attached to your power bank and continue shooting. And so technically you can do that, but I don't know how many would do that.
No. And I think the other thing with cameras that don't ship with chargers is the point of a charger is you can charge a battery out of the camera while you've got another battery in the camera. So having to plug your camera in, if your camera is also your charger, it's not exactly convenient.
No, but Chris said, you know, carrying a PD battery and a USB-C cable is really handy. But I do agree, and I really super agree. You know what? I'll tell you a real life experience. Last month I went out for a shoot, and that week I was so busy. I was shooting every single day. So when I get home, I take the memory card, I'll process the photos, submit it back to my clients and all kinds of things. So it was really busy for the entire week. And guess what? The last day of the week, I realized I haven't charged any of the batteries in my bag. So all of them were empty. Seriously, I'm not joking. It was really bad. And I was out ready to photograph another client of mine. And I had no battery. I literally, the battery indicator was blinking on my camera, so I know it would die as soon as I turn it on. And so I got about an hour left before I meet my client. So what can I do? But I have my power bank in my bag. But I have no cables. So I went around, but lucky enough, literally every supermarket now will sell you USB-C cables. You go to any supermarket, they'll sell you cables. So I quickly went out, pay £10. I know it's overpriced, but get £10, got a take cable, plug it to my power bank, plug it to my camera USB-C port, charge it for 1 hour, so I have enough 30% battery last entire photo shoot. So like that was dangerous, but then but at least this USB-C thing is it's really good. It's really, really good.
And you can charge your camera while you're driving to a location, can't you? If you've got the right accessory. I mean, most modern cars have USB ports anyway. I don't know if they've got high enough voltage, high enough current. I mean, but you can get accessory adapters for older cars and just charge a camera on the move. But yeah, I think with mirrorless in particular, the state of your batteries becomes a constant preoccupation.
Yep.
It's always there in the background, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And but yeah, so USB-C charging is definitely a plus, and I think that is essential for any sort of emergency cases. Like, you know, I just told you what happened to me, and it does happen, even though as experienced you may say that I am, you know, but there are times that I really did forget to charge all my battery. Believe me, I had 6 batteries in my bag, and all of them were empty. And that's
you've got other things to think about, haven't you? If you're shooting every single day, there's more going on than just what state your batteries are in.
Yeah,
you've got a lot to sort out, haven't you?
And so yeah, there you go. So that's a real life experience for you. That's another problem about digital cameras. That's something we haven't quite talked about. Is the amount of batteries and things that you have to carry with you it's insane these days. And it's part of the battery life thing, right? You know, same thing. You know, if your battery only lasts for a couple of 100 shots, that means you have to carry more batteries. If you don't carry battery, you have to carry power banks, and there's another battery somewhere. You are literally carrying more than less, and when you go out.
You can be, and also you have to do more preparation. If you're using a camera with limited battery life, you've got to do more planning before you go. So you can't just switch on the camera and say, "Oh, it's half full. That's fine."
Yep.
You switch on the camera, thing is half full. I've got to fix it. I've got to charge that tonight.
Yep.
It's with DSLR. It's the glass half full. With the mirrorless camera, the glass is half empty.
Pretty much. Well, Manila here, Martin has a comment here. I have a system that I still end up with a lot of dead batteries for some reasons. I recently started rigging my GH5 with a V-mount battery. Those big, massive battery. It's not cheap, big, but fewer mistakes. I mean, V-mount batteries is cool, but you know, obviously, it's probably better suited for video shooting because they do drain battery quicker than photos. And I don't think any photographer would use a V-mount batteries, unless you have a very big forearm because they are big and heavy. You're essentially like carrying another power bank attached to it.
Yeah, it is kind of another power bank. How do you put a V-mount battery on a GH5?
You rig it. You literally use rail. You put a rail underneath, and then you put the battery mount on the rail, and then you mount it. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Great.
Well, I have V-mount battery, but I don't use it that way. But okay. Right, and enough about battery, and I think without a doubt that everybody agrees that mirrorless cameras' battery life is definitely inferior compared to DSLRs. That's no comparison there, and I really do hope one day, you know, manufacturers will come up with the solutions and to make the battery last longer, and either through better, more efficient circuit board, you know, the processors and whatnot, everything, just to make it last a bit longer. I mean, I really hate changing batteries, to be quite honest, you know, and it's not something I'm looking forward to.
Well, I think sometimes the solution would be simply to make the cameras just a little bit bigger, so there's more space for bigger batteries. So all the Sony cameras I've used, I thought, which kind of leads on to the next point, I thought these are a bit small. And I'd rather they had another centimetre or two in the height. That would give plenty of room for bigger batteries, but apparently that's not not what the marketing people say people want. So
Yeah. Well,
so yeah,
so
handling. Yeah,
since you mentioned about handling, we'll also go into handling. But before we move
yeah,
on, and I think Anthony, maybe we'll put it in one of our chat next time, and I want a
yeah, yeah.
discussion about next camera that OM Systems should bring out. Yeah, that may not be a bad thing. Like we can talk about that for sure, and I'm pretty sure many of you are quite keen to have a little bit of a chip in as well, just to see what sort of features and technology you would like to see. And maybe OM System will be listening. You never know, and just don't get me fired. That's all.
well, no, look. If I say it, it'll be fine, and you can
Yeah,
just disagree with me. Then everyone's happy.
I'll disagree, or I'll just keep quiet.
Yeah, you keep. Yeah, okay, that's fair
Yeah.
enough. Yeah,
Okay, so yeah, we'll keep that in mind when we can bring up another chat to do that. So let's talk a little bit about handling, right? Okay, let me take my SLR down here. Not DSLR, this is SLR, and you have a D800 there, so you have a DSLR. So look at
yeah,
how big they are. These are SLR. You know, this is really this is actually one of my favorite SLR, the EOS3, and so they are big and chunky and heavy by today's standard. But I do like the grip. I do
yeah,
like that grip. It fits your hand really well, and then I think it's a very good handling experience when you hold something like this. It's definitely not the most lightweight option. I would say it's not travel friendly by today's standard because everything's become more compact. And I can bring down an EM5 by comparison. They can see how much smaller and modern mirrorless cameras can get, and in terms of size and weight. So, what are your experiences? All the audience here, you're listening and you're watching us at the moment, and tell us your experience in DSLRs, SLR versus some of you even talk about Leica earlier. So rangefinders against like modern mirrorless cameras, and what's your experience on them? Which one would you prefer? The pros and cons of each of the systems, and then you can all chip in here, and so we can tell you our experience. But we'd like to hear from your experience as well. That would be quite good. So go on, let's show us your crown jewel.
beg your pardon. Ta-da!
Yeah, look at that beast.
So this is, I had to admit, even for somebody who likes a chunky DSLR, this is pretty chunky. So it's D800. I don't know how much it weighs. It's probably about 30 kilograms or something. It feels like it. but I thought there was an interesting point to make here. So if I just take the lens off, has quite a big chunky body, then we can all see that. So yeah, quite. So
yeah.
This is the lens that came with it. It's a 24-85. And it's not very big. I thought
it's actually relatively compact.
It's not very big.
What
compact
aperture
lens,
is this
isn't
one?
it? It's f3.5 to 4.5.
Right.
So my possibly controversial question would be: can you imagine a mirrorless 24-85 being that small, full frame? Because I can't. Every full frame mirrorless camera that's come around that I've seen is very much larger. So my argument would be that yes, the D800 is a pretty massive camera, but DSLR lenses are actually surprisingly not as big as mirrorless ones. So how did that happen?
Right. I've taken down a whole bunch of cameras down here to show you
Oh
guys.
no, what have I done?
And no, just to compare the sizes, and because
Do you see? I don't know whether
go
you
on.
feel the same way, Jimmy, but some of these old DSLR lenses, when you
Yeah.
go back to them, you think, oh, they're not as big as I thought. But
They-
the
they-
modern mirrorless ones, on full frame at least, they're massive.
I don't know why. I mean, just because you're showing one of the SLR lenses, let me show you this one as well. Look, this one is the old Minolta, Konica Minolta, 28-75.
I know, it's incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
This is a 2.8 constant aperture. Look at the size of these things.
I know.
And compared to like the latest any manufacturers, Sony, Sigma, Leica, and Canon, Nikon, all their latest 24 to 70 2.8 lenses, they are at least double the size of this thing.
Yeah.
Why and how? I don't know. This thing is 2.8. Seriously, and
Yeah.
it's tiny.
Yeah.
And why are they getting so big?
I think we're going to come to lenses, aren't we? I think the short answer is probably that lenses are much better and more sophisticated and faster focusing than ever they were. Blah blah blah, and
Yep.
twice as big.
Twice as big. Although I do
4
mount this
times
on
the
a
price.
on a big camera.
Yeah, but I suppose this is my argument. We can the pitch for mirrorless cameras has always been that the cameras are smaller. Yes, they are.
Yeah.
The lenses are not.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
Look at that. This is one of
28
my
to
favorite
70.
SLR film SLRs, and this is the Dynix Minolta Dynix. This is the 9T, so this is a titanium body, so not the normal one. And yeah, it's incredible, these things. And look at the size of the lens. This is a 2870. I think I think all the modern versions are at least double the size and weight and 4 times the price.
We have got to the point.
Yeah,
we have got to the point where if you want to buy a 2870 2.8,
yeah,
you're looking at the wrong side of 2,500.
yeah. It's okay. Yeah,
For
this
own brand
is
lens,
maybe another chat altogether about prices these days, and I don't want to open another can of worms, and it may upset a lot of people. I mean, I'm upset. I have to pay so much these days for lenses, and are just incredible, and it's just horrible. So just by comparison, here it's the size of an EM10. It's almost like a toy by comparison, I mean, look, I just put it side by side to the SLRs, and obviously they're similar size in DSLR in a pro body. Hopefully, I can demonstrate this side by side. I'm gonna have to go back a little bit. Look at the size of this difference. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
It
is.
Look, it's incredible how small you can get for mirrorless cameras. Obviously EM10 is one of the smallest, and in the entire mirrorless market. Obviously there are smaller cameras, and like the Panasonic GM1 is even tinier. But I'm talking about a more like an SLR body shape mirrorless camera with an EVF built in, because GM1 hasn't got an EVF, so anything with an EVF, this would probably as small as you can get, and then in terms of a SLR style body camera with an EVF, and it's really small, it is really light, and for that reasons I think that you really can't beat that. But in terms of handling though, and I even though that the SLR is heavier, I do like the feel of it just by holding, because of the grip size. And when you're a pro, you hold it, you just got that, I don't know, it's just more tactile feeling when you hold the camera. And I don't see many modern digital mirrorless cameras had that sort of feel. Even on the some of the Sony cameras that I tested and tried before, and also Fujifilm cameras, and one of the reasons I liked the EM1 series and the OM1 is because the grip is very similar to the old SLR style, the whole shape of it. So when you put your hand next to it, it feels kind of very retro feeling, kind of old school tactile, that you hold the camera securely in your hand and it's not going to go anywhere. And but slimmer body like the EM10 and EM5 or OM5, whatever, they have a much shallower grip, and it just never the same.
Do you find in your work that you're often holding a heavy lens, and not necessarily a heavy camera, but a big lens on a medium camera in one hand while you're doing stuff with your other hand? And that's where you need the grip, isn't it? Because it's often the weight of the lens rather than the weight of the camera that makes a bigger grip more secure and more comfortable.
Yes, and it's the overall balance of the whole setup when you,
Yeah.
when you put it. And you know, when I review lenses in my channels, and you know, uh, I do talk about handling quite a lot, because you know, people may not notice it or may not appreciate it if they only use the lens or shoot with in a short time at a time. And but I shoot hours at a time, which is like much longer than any normal people would.
Yeah.
So balancing is quite a big thing for me if I come to use a lens. And so if it feel imbalance in the, you're starting to hurt or strain your wrists when you're holding for a bit longer, because you like you said, I often hold the camera in one hand and start doing thing with another, you know, just trying to point the subject, move over to a little bit left and do this and that. So like I often do that, like you said. And any sort of imbalance feeling would definitely make a difference. Just while we're on the topic about handling, and because I know some of you guys like Leica. There you go, that's a Leica. And so this is one of my old Leicas, and I use this. This is almost like my trusty workhorse back in the days, and when I used to shoot film. So there's no handling whatsoever with these guys, because no grip. It's horrible. No. It's really horrible. In terms of ergonomic, you know, you can't get worse than this. You just don't feel secure at all, and you're holding a very expensive, thing. So like I've never hold it like freehand like this. Always like either wrap around my wrist or around my neck, because I know I could easily slip the whole thing down and just drop the whole camera. And there are obviously rangefinder style cameras still exist, you know, like the Pen series in the Olympus and the X Pro series on the Fujifilm. They are rangefinder style cameras, so they almost basically identical, basically just a rectangular block, and there's no grip and no ergonomic or handling, so to speak. And may not be the best thing, but if people like the look of it, you know, sometimes, you know, look can be something else.
Well, and with a small lens, it's fine, but not with the big lens. And if you're out shooting with a constant aperture zoom, as I'm sure you are a lot of the time, and most people will be, you've got to have a camera with a good grip. Otherwise, if you don't, you might not be in danger of dropping it, but you are going to get fatigue in your fingers. If you've just got 3 fingers on your hand, taking all the kind of torsional weight of a big heavy lens stuck on the front of the camera, it is fatiguing. It is quite tiring.
It is,
and if you're getting camera shake, that's why.
and remember the days. I don't know, probably a lot of you will have the same experience, right? You know, have an SLR, and then you mount one of these 70 to 200 2.8 zoom lens, big massive chunk of glass, and you're hanging around your neck, and because the lens is so heavy, you're just kind of like pointing downward all the time. And when you walk, that lens constantly bashing your thigh. It's not a great experience. And but it is what it is. You know, that's the old days, and things has improved quite a lot since. And I must say, but even having said that, even modern digital mirrorless cameras do have the same problem with bigger lenses. And this is still why the reasons they still include the tripod collar, for the reasons they are tripod collars, because you can use a monopod, you can use you can mount on a tripod when you're resting, put it on a sandbag if you need to, and they are actually functional things, just not just for the looks, and they are there for a reason. Okay, so we are moving on from handling.
You've got another can of worms. I've just been opening this fresh can, Jimmy. So
yes, I can see that. This is an interesting one though. Sensor dust. Okay. How many of you have experienced sensor dust or dust on the sensor, basically?
It's everyone, right?
And I can tell you some horror story of mine, and in a minute. So let me know your experience of it, because I know modern digital cameras now, and I'm not so sure about other brands, but at least on Olympus, they have the ultrasonic thing that's going on. So every time you turn on and off the camera, the sensor will shake in a certain frequencies and shake off all the dust and moisture. So it should theoretically clean the sensors every single time. And so for that, I mean, I have to tell you that throughout the last 5 years, I've been using Micro Four Thirds, more particular the Olympus system. I never experienced an issue with dust on the sensor, and that's the fact. And I changed lenses in all kinds of situations. But same can't be said with my digital Leica nor the digital DSLRs that I used before that. And
Interesting.
yeah, so what's your experience then, Rod?
Well, all cameras have dust removal systems. Some seem to be better than others.
Yep.
So I've never had any issue with dust on Micro Four Thirds to speak of. I've had a lot of dust issues on Sony gear. I'm not bashing Sony. I wouldn't have bought Sony if I didn't like Sony gear. But with dust in particular, they do seem particularly prone.
Oh.
And I didn't have any real issues with dust when I was using Nikon DSLRs. And I've spoken to a few people who feel that because you've got the mirror in the way and the sensors are so much further back in the body,
Yeah.
they're less prone to collecting dust. But I'm just putting that forward as a theory because some systems seem worse than others, even in the mirrorless world. So I'd be interested to know what others have experienced. But in my Nikon days and all my DSLR testing days, I did have other issues, and they were horrible. And that was oil spatter.
Oil.
Oil
Okay.
off the. So Nikon had a thing for a while with oil spatter with new cameras straight from the factory. That's the Nikon D600.
I've heard that news before. Yeah.
And I took an EOS 40D out for a 4 days test.
Right.
Where drove for about an hour and a half, 2 hours down to the coast, took a load of pictures, came back. Then I found out that had a great oil streak across the bottom of the center. So half the shots we used this because it's right across a sky, for example.
Yeah.
So that seems to have gone away. But yeah, dust in general, it's a real nuisance. The most trouble I've had has always been with Sony gear, my Sony cameras.
That's interesting. I'd never know.
MFT.
I never know.
No, not with MFT.
Definitely not with Olympus, and because I have a lot, and you know that I shoot professionally with Micro Four Thirds for the last 5-6 years now, and I do change lenses whether it's windy, snowing, dusty, whatever outside, and I change lenses there and then. I never really have an issue about that, and but you know the story that I wanted to tell you is my my very first 5D Canon 5D full frame camera. And obviously that was one of the first digital full frame cameras ever, and apart from the EOS 1 at the time. And the reason I want to say that because I had no experience with digital camera. That was actually my first digital SLR. Full stop. That's my first digital SLR.
EM1.
No, the EOS 5D. The original Canon 5D, yeah. And so that was my first digital camera. Before that, I was using a film EOS 1 before, and so I had no experience about dust. But I know that there were a couple of times when I shooting with a lens, I stopped down to f8 and starting to see this kind of shadow on my images, and because I had no experience, I didn't know what it was, and I started asking around. And then eventually I phoned up Canon technicians and the service department and said, "Oh, it's sensor dust." I said, "What? Sensor dust?" I got no. I had never experienced dust on my film before, so you know, and yeah, it's sensor dust. So you need to have your sensor clean. I said, "Oh, okay. So how do you do it?" "Oh, just blow it."
Oh yeah.
So do you know what I did? I went out to get one of those compressed air.
Oh right. Oh, dear.
Yeah, so not a rocket blower, which I should have used a rocket blower, but I didn't. I went out to buy one of these compressed air cans that you use to clean computer. I went there, point straight to the sensor and blast it. And guess what? I can't use the sensor afterward because it was covered with a layer of chemical, and then I couldn't use the camera, so I have to immediately send the camera back to Canon, and then they took them 2 weeks to clean the sensor. They did clean it. They didn't even take out the sensor. They cleaned it for me, and then said, "You should not use any compressed air to do that." Well, you asked me to blow it, so I thought I need to use a compressed air will be the strongest thing I could get, right?
It's full of all sorts of propellants, isn't it?
Yeah, so obviously I
I
learned it the hard way. But after that, I did starting to learn more experience and learn more about the whole sensor cleaning thing. And I bought some of these sensor cleaning kits with the swipe and solutions and things. So I've been cleaning sensors ever since. And so I have been cleaning sensors for all my Canon and Leica gear because I'm more experienced afterward. But yeah, this is something that it's a real story, and also I tend to have problem with DSLRs and because I don't think they had this kind of sensor cleaning technologies back then, and modern DSLR may have it, but the one that I had wasn't.
A few didn't, yeah, early ones didn't. They all did in the end, but the early ones didn't. But you're right about Leicas, by the way, because I remember now the test shots I've done with Leicas. I've had dust issues because I don't think they have any kind of sensor shaking system at all.
Like I have one here, and then this is digital. This is not a film one, and so this is a digital one here. So yeah, this hasn't got anything, and the only thing that will basically cover the sensor is the actual physical shutter itself. But you know that the shutter is not airtight, so that means that when you open the lens, when you change lenses outside, and dust will go into the camera, and if you do more than once, more likely you're gonna have a few dust specks starting to stick to the sensor. When the problem is because I shoot Leica on the street, I tend to use a hyperfocus. I stop down the lens, so every time I stop down the lens, you know what happened? You see the dust every single time, and so it's not a great experience.
It's the opposite of depth of field. It's depth of focus. It's the plane of sharp focused on the plane of the sensor, so wide open you don't notice anything because it's just slightly off the plane of the receptors. But if you stop down, it's much greater depth of focus on the sensor plane, so then those spots come into sharp focus. I've got a different horror story for you now you mentioned yours, Jimmy. I had Fujifilm XS10.
Oh yeah.
And as with most mirrorless cameras, the sensors are quite close to the front of the body.
Yeah.
I put the kit lens on it clumsily, and there's a lug. So I put it on a slight angle. There's a lug on the back of the lens, or it may even have been the rim of the lens, hit the sensor, scratch the sensor. I got a right telling off from Fujifilm. I didn't know that was even possible until I did it. But that is something to consider. The sensor is so close to the front of the lens mount. It's easy to clean them. It's also easy to knock them with stuff if you're not careful.
Well, actually, now you mention it, Leica had the same issue, and all the digital Leicas. Some of the older vintage collapsible lenses. And if you read the menu, they are not. They actually don't recommend you to use all those old collapsible lenses, because when you collapse the lens, it has a tendency of either clipping the physical mechanical shutter or the sensor. And although, having said that, I tried, it never quite reached the shutter. So maybe I'm just one of the lucky ones. But they didn't recommend you to do that. It's interesting because, from a Leica perspective, you know, how they designed the digital camera is supposed to be the digital version of the film camera. So the flange distance is supposed to be the same. Should be the same. So that means that if you are able to use a collapsible lens in a film camera, you should be able to use a collapsible lens on the digital body. But having said that, if you open the menus, and they actually do recommend not to use any collapsible lenses because you could potentially damage the shutter. And so yeah, there you go. I'm just reading out from the instructions, and you can take your own risk and try it yourself. I have tried it once with my 50mm f2 collapsible, and never had an issue with that. But I don't have any other collapsible lenses to try on, nor I would intend to. So hopefully that clears something.
Don't break your Leica on our account.
No, absolutely
just
not.
Just to test it.
Yeah. Just on the issue of sensor dust, and it's quite interesting because we've got some split experience as well. And I saw Corey saying that his D5300 is a dust magnet, and then we got Terry saying that his D850 has no issues.
I think it's going to depend on where you shoot and how. So some of the shoots I did on the magazine, if you're by the coast and it's windy and there's a lot of spray in the air, that's not dust, obviously. It's a different kind of sensor problem. that's a worry, because if you get any salt spray on the sensor, then you're in for a proper clean, and some of that stuff is quite gritty. So I imagine that you would have less trouble with the DSLR because the sensor is more heavily recessed. I wouldn't particularly enjoy changing lenses on a mirrorless camera in environments which were either dusty or you've got this kind of very sticky spray or moisture in the air.
Yeah.
That's a worry.
Well,
I'd always turn around,
yeah,
have the camera pointing down, try and do it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, having said that, I do still employ a practice when I change lenses, even with my Olympus gears, and I tend to face the camera down, so hopefully try not to catch where the wind is blowing, and that should potentially minimize the risks by some margin. And if you do that sort of care, excuse me, and it's also quite interesting as well, because I think Cupcake Bunny also said that has similar issues even with the D850. But just on your note that you were saying about changing lenses, on seasides, and let's say on the seaside, sea sprays can be dangerous, because not like a normal rainfall and things like that, because sea contains salt. So when it hits the sensor, it sticks to it. It's not just moisture. When it dries off, you leave dust part. You actually leave the salt crystals on it. That's something that you should be very careful of. And something when I do on the seaside shoot, and I've done many times in the past, and I always take extra care when I do that, even though I know the sensor has the capability of repelling moistures and dust, and even the system may have proven to be fairly effective in getting rid of all this stuff. But I always think that take extra care when you do to environments such as the seaside, for instance, and because seawater can be damaging, and especially once it's dried off, and you may have a hard time trying to clean it off, and if not actually scratching the sensor itself, because don't forget, when the salt gets hard and dry, it's really difficult. You have to spray some solution first to melt it and dissolve it before you start to wipe it off. Otherwise, you'll be risking scratching the sensor itself.
It's probably blown in some sand particles too, if you're in those conditions, and they are going to be even worse. But I've also been shooting in situations where there's can be lots of sticky stuff in the air, which could be animal fibers, could be fibers of furnishings, because they can be quite oily. But also, I suspect a few times I've picked up bits of pollen or other airborne plant material, stuff that's too sticky for any sensor shaking device to shake off. You have got to clean it off. And my experience of cleaning is that whenever I use a sensor swab, I seem to drag more gunk in from the edges of the sensor, the kind of rebate around the sensor, than ever was there that I was trying to clean off. Yeah. It's not a skill I have.
Well, and since we talk about this, and might as well do some OM system advertisement here. And for those who are using OM system stuff, and you know that every photography show that we run in the UK, and if you so happen in the UK, they offer free sensor cleaning services. So like you can do it once a year, and then so you can come over every year, just have the sensor clean, and it's all good, free of charge. Why not? You have a professional looking after your sensor, and I had mine done a couple of times, even though that I should do more often because of the way I shoot. Well,
Will they do only Olympus, or will they do other brands?
Unfortunately, they only do Olympus.
No, I was going to say, if it's another brand, they could just dig a...
Or maybe you can ask them to do it for you if you buy Olympus camera there and then.
Am I right in thinking that I think I spoke to somebody who's doing the sensor cleaning, that they're using rice paper?
No. Do they use rice paper?
I spoke to somebody who's using rice paper.
I don't know. I know people use newspaper to clean oil from glass. Yeah, so I'm not sure about rice paper.
No, fair enough. Pretend I didn't say it. Perhaps I dreamt it. I don't know.
Maybe.
But people have all sorts of methods. I tried a few. I tried those whirling electrostatic brushes,
Yeah.
which
Oh, I have one of
they
those.
just
I
seem
have
to
one of
move
those.
stuff around. They just seem to move
No,
stuff
they
around. As far
they
as
work. They really work.
okay, okay.
I have
Jimmy,
one. That
Jimmy, you just got the skill. You just got the skill, and I haven't.
you know you
That's all
do
it
know that you
is.
have to you need to charge those brush first. You know, yeah,
I
you
read the instructions. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And you
yeah,
charge with positive, and then you stick this
yeah,
brush onto the sensor. Hopefully, the negative, the dust will come up and stuck to
yeah,
it, and then you shake it
yeah,
off again.
yeah.
But for me, it worked for my Leica. I mean, I use that a lot on the Leica.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. But
Interesting.
anyway,
Yeah, yeah,
let's move on. Looks like that we have some different experience from different body as well. So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
interesting to read. So the next one is lenses. Right. You are saying that DSLR system have a lot of lenses and cheaper too, while some of the APS-C mirrorless system have hardly any. And I agree with you
Some,
actually. I
some.
agree with you, especially APS-C. I have to say,
Yeah,
APS-C doesn't have any or many choices compared to full frame or Micro Four for that matter. Micro Four has a big ecosystem there,
yeah.
and but full frame also have a lot of stuff.
Full
But
frame's fine.
APS-C
Yeah,
seems to
yeah.
be kind of in the middle, but they don't have many choices.
So Canon's got itself in a situation where it's launched 3 APS-C EOS R bodies,
Yep.
and there are only 3 lenses, 2 of which are standard zooms. So it's got as many cameras as it has lenses. Um, it's I think, well, you and I probably feel we know why they're doing it, but it's just frustrating for somebody like me who spent a lot of time with digital SLR systems, where if you had an APS-C Canon EFS mount camera,
Yep.
there were dozens of lenses.
Yeah.
If you had a Nikon DX camera, there were dozens.
What happened to all those EFS lenses? You know, like why can't they make the basically update them and make it into the APS-C version for the R systems? And I don't know. You know,
They'll just tell you to get the adapter. Get the adapter, mate. You'll be fine.
oh, bollocks to that. Sorry about my language.
You can't say that. Can't say that. You're gonna have to edit that out when you put this on. When you put up the YouTube version.
So
But yeah. What?
the only
Why
APS-C
buy the
system.
adapter?
Yeah, the only APS-C system I see that has some kind of choice is Fujifilm, because they are the main kind of APS-C manufacturers now, right? And even Sigma is now kind of slowly distancing themselves away from the crop sensor lenses, and they're focusing on all the full frame stuff, because they're also obviously in the L mount alliance with Panasonic and also Leica, and but it's strange. It's really strange that we don't have that anymore.
No, I think it's quite sad. It kind of puts you off the APS-C format, which is possibly another discussion for another time. But it seems to me, at first I thought it was an error of judgment by Canon and Nikon. Now I'm starting to think it's just a plan to get you into the system. But yeah, I think since we're talking about DSLR versus mirrorless, if you're comparing APS-C DSLR systems with APS-C mirrorless, and you want a good lens choice, and you don't want to buy a Fujifilm, it's DSLR, because you just can't get the same range of lenses in their mirrorless equivalents from those makers.
Yeah,
it's quite frustrating.
It is, and I do think, you know, like I know many of the viewers and listeners would agree that there's a place for every format, whether it's going to be medium, large, full frame, APS-C, or Micro Four. I said it many times. There's no right or wrong answers there, and there are obviously plus and minuses in each of the formats. And so I do think APS-C deserves more credit than it is at the moment, and also Micro Four for that matter, because we have certain advantage that full frame cannot match, you know, and which we discussed many of these things before. I mean, every photographic system, they're all tools for different genre of photography, for different purposes, and we all have a different. You know, we all have a place in the market to doing certain things, and So I think like manufacturers should actually pay more attention, especially those who are offering a crop a format like Nikon, Sony, and Canon. They all offer APS-C, but they don't seem to support them, even though they have launched cameras, but they
No.
just completely forget about the system altogether.
I mean, the EOS R7, that's a properly powerful camera. It's like the EOS 90D SLR, but better. And there's just no lenses for it. So it wasn't very many years ago that practically all the readers of the magazines I wrote for shot with APS-C, because there were dozens of cameras, dozens of lenses, and they could afford the kit. But in the space of a few years, that seems to have changed. And now, as Canon and Nikon particularly have swapped over to mirrorless, they seem to have decided the APS-C format is like a way into the system they want you to have, rather than the system in itself. So I think that's disappointing. I think if you're talking about DSLR versus mirrorless and you want to stay with APS-C, that's where DSLR still have an advantage.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. The whole thing, about forget about APS-C, because I mean, I can understand what you just said, about manufacturers trying to entice people to get into the system because the APS-C bodies are cheaper by comparison to their full frame equivalent, and but then like, let's say if a person buys an APS-C camera these days, and then they get used to the reach because it's crop sensor, right? If they use any of the full frame lenses and they got the 1.5 times crop factor. And then so like 100 would become 150 and so forth. And when they eventually, let's say they move up to full frame, say, oh, I don't have the same reach. And then look at the catalog. Oh my God, I need to fork out another $3,000 to get the next thing I could do the same reach. So like, I don't think it makes sense. People may actually want to keep the APS-C system because they like the format, they like the actual size and weight, for instance. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense at all.
If you're into wildlife and sports or portraits, I think that is not a problem, because with both those systems you can just put on a full frame lens. You've got the crop factor, makes the lenses appear longer, but that can be a good thing.
Yeah.
The issue is for people like me, for example, or for travel photographers, or somebody who likes interiors or architecture who needs a wide lens, and there aren't any. There simply aren't. That absolutely is bizarre. Yeah.
It is. Well, never mind, and we'll see how the APS-C format goes. I don't want them to disappear, and then because I mean, I like photography, full stop. I like photography. I like cameras. They call me a nerd, but then I mean, I have no objection about full frame, medium format, whatnot, anything. And I shoot with what I have, and adapt to the system as a whole, and. So I have no objection about any sort of format, but just interesting to see how the market would go, whichever direction it is. And at the moment, I obviously we all know the full frame is kind of dominant in terms of market, and medium format, all the other system seems to be the leftover child, so to speak, and they're not quite deserve the full attentions, but I think they should, because people just not. I don't know. They believe in what influencers or marketing is showing them, instead of actually learning about how to exploit or maximize the system itself. And crop sensors has one major advantage to reach, and then so because you can you can have a relatively cheap lens but have maximum reach. And otherwise, in a full frame system, you will have to fork out 6, 7, 8, maybe even $10,000 to get the same thing. And
we should definitely have this chat about cost, because we can produce some proper figures that show the cost of equivalent systems on different formats, and I think it is quite alarming. And when I was on my Nikon magazine, we thought we were hard done by paying £1,000 for a pro lens. If only we knew what was coming.
Exactly.
So
nowadays you can't even buy half the camera for $1,000.
Exactly.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, anyway, let's move on to the next thing. And I think we kind of touched base on
We
that
did
already.
that, didn't we?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we did
vintage and
that.
retro lenses. So maybe we can skip that one. And but
Yeah.
we can have a final summary on that. And I do think
Yeah.
mirrorless camera is better if you want to use any of the vintage old style
Way
lenses,
better. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the mirrorless, how they design the mirrorless cameras and is it has a minimal or smaller flange distance. That means you can practically adapt any lenses on any of the mirrorless cameras regardless of format, and that's the beauty of it. And like we said earlier, there's a resurgence in the second-hand market now, and there are people buying old vintage lenses and adapt them to newer mirrorless cameras, and just prefer the look and feel of them. Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. Not so cool though, now that I want to buy some of the older lenses for cheap, and it doesn't exist anymore, and they're all bloody overpriced. And and even Leica lenses in particular, I used to be able to get some old Leica lenses. I mean, they were still expensive, but you were able to get some for like £300-400, and an old 1960 Leica vintage lens. Nowadays, you'll be lucky to find anything under 800, and it's just ridiculous prices. And some of the older Pentax lenses, they were like, I don't know, £10, £15. You can get them on eBay. Now they're like 30, 40. Some of the 1.4, 1.2 lenses, they're going for 200 quid. They're definitely overpriced for what they are, and then. But anyway, this is what's happening now because of the mirrorless market has kind of done a revival on all these old vintage lenses.
Yes, yeah.
And good, because I don't want to see lenses being wasted, and then they are perfectly functional lenses. So I'm happy to see people using them. Not so happy that because I want to buy some, because I now have to pay more for them. So that's definitely not good for my pocket.
Quite true.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. And we have autofocus. Autofocus. Oh my goodness. All right. Rob, what have you got in store for us?
Right. So I'm going to state something which is going to be obvious to most people, but it never goes away when you're using them. DSLRs have two focusing systems. You've got the viewfinder focusing system where you've got a dedicated AF center underneath the mirror, a little sub mirror, and all sorts of shenanigans going on there. Those are very good. They're quick, they're effective, very good. However, if you want to shoot in live view on a DSLR, you have to use on-center autofocus, which usually means on older DSLRs you go to contrast AF, which is painfully slow. And it might take you about 5 seconds to figure out it's just not going to focus at all. So it's something you use when you have to, not because you want to. So my point is that DSLRs will always have two AF systems with different modes, different speed, different performance, different qualities, so that even if you get a camera like the Canon EOS 90D, which has Canon's dual pixel CMOS AF in live view, it's as good as a mirrorless camera in live view. In a viewfinder, you're back to the regular optical AF sensor. It's a switch that's still jarring, and jars you even more if you start using your DSLR in live view. You've got two autofocus systems. There's no way around it.
Okay. That I remember when I had my 5D, and especially Mark II. That's when they first introduced live view shooting, and the first generation of Canon live view wasn't that great at all, and the focusing was absolutely horrendous. There's no CAF, and there's all single AF, and it's so slow. It's slower than the any of the contrast detect system that you guys think is already slow, and then back in the first gen or EM5, so it was almost unusable. And but I know later on they had the dual pixels and on the thing, but I totally appreciate what you just said there, because you have to flick in and out of the system if you want to use the mirror, and then you close the shutter. That process alone takes about a second or two, and then it's slow, and then it's just not practical.
You're constantly reminded that DSLRs are meant to be used with the mirror down, not up.
Yep.
So even if you've got one that's good in live view or good at video, this whole thing of having to flip the mirror up is just such an unnatural thing for a DSLR that I never quite got over it.
No. And but lucky we don't have that in the mirrorless cameras because, as the
That's
name
right.
suggests, no mirror,
That's right.
mirrorless
And
camera.
it's the same AF in both. So you've got your AF tracking, you've chosen your AF point, you've chosen your zone, AFS or AFC, whichever you want in live view, and it's right there in the EVF when you switch, and vice versa. You don't
And
have this constant change.
yeah, and now they have, well, most of the modern cameras now have hybrid, so they have both contrast and face detect, and so give you the kind of almost like 100% accuracy there. In if I may say, and but that's obviously technically speaking, not practically, because in real life, and it's not that you can always get 100% accurate, and depending on situations and how you shoot and how you focus them. But yeah, that's an interesting thing there. Oh, that's the next one is going to be a big one. Oh my goodness, image quality, image quality. Right, you say mirrorless is typically a little bit better, and right, okay,
Because that's where all the development effort is being put today. So I think if you're going to compare image quality, technically there's no reason why mirrorless should be better than DSLRs. But I think the camera makers have largely stopped developing DSLR tech. So any DSLR still being sold today will have sensor tech and processor tech that's probably a few years old. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Almost certainly more than good enough, but it won't be the same. It'll be that step behind, I think.
Well, actually, what is the latest DSLRs apart from Pentax? And
I'm not sure that's the latest tech. Can I say that?
Okay, right, fair enough.
Well, no, I think it'll be the D850, which is an absolutely splendid camera. But I don't think.
When was that? That was 2016, is it? 17?
Somewhere around there. But I don't think. I think the Z7 II will have a sensor that's been moved on from the D850s. So maybe if you're shooting at ISO 25600, you'll see a difference.
Right.
Or maybe, and it's certainly going to be better for video. So I think DSLR sensor development has probably stopped, but mirrorless is carrying on.
Unless one of them decided to bring up one last punch in the DSLRs, and just release one camera, put all the bells and whistles in it, and call it a day.
Who's going to do that? I think Canon might have done that already with the 90D. But
you think so? You think so? Yeah. I would like to see one last EOS 1, just to have a closure of the 1 series, and that would be good.
Is anyone? I suppose old pros with a lot of those EF super telephotos will still buy one, but it's speed, not resolution. The EOS 1, though, isn't it?
It is speed, yeah. I think it was a 20 megapixel sensor. It's not like massive, so, and it's built for speed. But and imagine all this press office. They still have these lenses that worth about 30 grand, and then they've got to make the return on the investment. So if Canon does decide to release one last DSLRs, they might still buy them.
Carl just wants to mention shutter shock or mirror.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
that's a good one. Mirror slap. That's a good one. Bearing in mind that camera makers go to a great deal of effort to damp the mirrors, and very often you'll get a difference in versions. So I have a feeling the Nikon D810 had a revised mirror damping mechanism, but it's a constant process of development. But given that the mirror is already up and parked by the time the shutter opens, I mean, these things are fractions of a second apart. Just because the mirror going up and down seems like a kind of serious mechanical action, that's not to say it can't be controlled or that it's doing any harm. Also, don't forget, mirrorless cameras have shutters. They're just as big. Yeah. Mirrorless cameras have focal plane shutters every bit as big and as clumsy and as clunky as a DSLR's focal plane shutter. So the main thing is going to be the mirror. But I think the thing with shutter shock, it's going to be dependent on the camera. I know different cameras at different times have had issues with with Shutterstock at specific speeds.
Yep.
But it's a question of camera design, and very often the camera makers will address it, and they'll revise the shutter mechanisms and damping to improve on that. So I think the principal difference, obviously, between DSLRs and mirrorless is the mirror.
Yep.
I'm not sure myself that has a big impact on sharpness. I've not really seen that. I think stabilization does, but that's another thing we'll come on to. But I think just because DSLRs sound noisy, I'm not convinced they cause any extra vibration in the image.
I think depending on what sort of thing you're photographing, and I think on a day-to-day shooting and normal shooting scenarios, and I don't see it should have any impact, like you said, Rod. But I think in situations such as macro photography, for instance, I think that may have a point, because those any minute movement from the cameras, or if you want to do photo stacks, and that may be an issue, and because any sort of minute movements could cause the frame to move out of alignment, even by 0.5 millimeters, can cause an issues on photo stacks, and so I can kind of appreciate it, and that's why some of the DSLRs, they did have the features, I think, sort of functions to minimize that as well.
Mirror up mode, yeah. So I've got one right here somewhere. Mirror up, or MUP, as I like to call it. So it just pops the mirror up ahead of the exposure. So yeah, you're right.
Yep. So there you go. So that's hopefully answer your question, Carl. And on that note, and Cupcake Bunny also said that the EM1X has a really quiet shutter. I do find a lot of the mirrorless cameras, mechanical shutters, are quite quiet these days. And
they vary.
They do vary, and I do in general. Olympus shutters are definitely a lot quieter than some I tried before, and certainly have that. I don't know how to explain it, but it's very tactile yet very damped feel. You know, when you shoot, and it's different when compared to DSLRs, and because obviously you get the whole mirror up and down, so you can actually feel it. At the same time, though, I kind of miss that, because that tells you you're doing something.
Well, it's surprising how much of the noise actually comes from the shutter, not the mirror. A good deal of it is the mirror, but even with mirrorless cameras, there is a very great variation. So I'm thinking primarily of, so the point about an Olympus camera is, some of those shutters are very quiet. But the whole internet forum is devoted to arguing over which cameras have the best shutter sound, as in the most satisfying. So my Sony, my A7R2 shutter sound is quite soft and drawn out. I don't like it very much. I like the D800 because it's like somebody slamming a door. That seems quite positive. But I had a Sony A6000, which had a really sharp sound. It's like a really sharp clack, which I really liked. All focal plane shutters, but completely different characteristics when you use them. It's something. It's quite surprising how different they are.
Yeah, it's interesting because you sounded like one of those car channels talk about like the different engine note, a different engine or exhaust note, and but they do all sound very, very different, and it's something that I really want to show you guys how one of the most discreet mechanical shutter is obviously they like as cloth shutters, and then they are extremely quiet, and I can't demonstrate it because if I cock it I'll waste a frame because I've got film inside, and so it's really, really cool. It's just nice to it doesn't really make a sound. It has the really faint click sound, and that's all you can hear, and you can't hear anything else, and I think that's just sounds magical, and every time I use the camera.
It lets you know that the exposure's been made, and it's a kind of tactile feedback you get through the camera. I think if you're an interface designer, you call it haptic feedback. So if you had a fully electronic camera, you'd have to work out some little vibrating mechanism, like a PlayStation controller, to give you a little vibration to let you know something's happened.
So let me see if I can demonstrate this digital Leica shutter sound. Can you hear that?
That's quiet, yeah. That's nice, isn't it?
It's very mechanical. This sounds and very very
Yeah.
tinny in a way. And this doesn't have a mirror. It just basically the shutter up and down, and still not as discreet as the film camera, but certainly feels very old school in a way. And it feels almost like an old camera. By comparison, if you any modern digital camera, I don't think this one has battery. No, it doesn't have any battery. So otherwise, I would demonstrate the EM10, and because that mechanical shutter doesn't really make a noise. And maybe you can with your D800.
Yeah, I could go out on the road and you'd still hear it. Hang on, I'll see if I can.
I can hear the focus motor.
No, oh right, so yeah, this is the Pentax. Pentax focusing. Hang on. Can you hear that?
Yeah. Oh, look at that!
That is old school, yeah. Sorry.
It reminds me of one of these old point and shoot cameras, and then it does
It's like a broken chainsaw. Yeah. I was going to see if I do the shutter sound on this Pentax.
I'm feeling nostalgic now.
How's that for a shutter sound?
That's not bad. That's not bad, actually.
I reckon they try and, I think they massage the sound just like they do with sports car exhausts to make it sound quite cool.
I don't know if you know, and when I was shooting with Canon, they told me that there is an engineer in the design department specialized in making sure the shutter noise is good.
Right, let's try this.
Oh, they're very different to Pentax.
It is. It's quicker. It's quicker, which I like.
Yeah.
But I would say a lot of that is the shutter, not the mirror. Interesting. Anyway.
But like I said, in the Canon, I'm pretty sure every manufacturer had one engineer like that, and they have a shutter engineer who makes sure the sound's good. And I'm pretty sure they had a role in that. And before, I'm not sure they still exist in the mirrorless world, but then I'm pretty sure they had one in the SLR days.
Well, I think they must have been waiting for him to start work when I had my EOS 300D.
Yep.
And the 400D, both of which sound like they've got asthma. It's this kind of wheezy whining noise. They're not very nice.
Imagine a digital camera allow you to choose different shutter noise.
Well,
that would be quite cool, right?
You can. I've got a Fujifilm X30 which has only got electronic shutter, and if you want it to sound like you're taking a picture, you have to switch on the shutter noise, and you can choose what the noise is. You haven't got a wide choice. You couldn't do like a Blackbird or a car horn, or it's not like a ringtone on the phone. But yeah, a little bit.
But that would be good, right? Let's choose an old Leica M6.
Well, yeah, that's a good
maybe
idea.
it would be really cool. Just play a soundtrack, right? Right.
That would be quite cool.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next bit, and the video is the next one, and it's true. Because since I came from the Canon cam before, and I know the 5D Mark II was the revolutionary camera because it was the first ever digital consumer level cameras that allows you to shoot videos, and it was becoming a norm, right? And when the 5D Mark II came out, it changed the whole scenery, and some people even made a career out of it by using DSLRs to make short films and becoming a professional themselves. So I think DSLRs first definitely transformed the industry, but it's the mirrorless cameras nowadays that really propel it forward. That's my take on it, because now there are other things that we can talk about follow on later, and such as stabilization, such as all the new videos technologies and codecs and stuff that's now available and not so much in the DSLR world. So yeah, everything is changing now.
I think people shoot video differently now. When all our videos for the magazine used to be shot by our video guy on an EOS 60D.
Yep.
But because it didn't really have continuous AF, the videos were shot differently. They were shot in a kind of old school style where, he'd frame the shot, he'd say, right, you need to stand there. Right, hang on, I need to focus now because you're not standing where I told you. And it's that kind of thing. they're fine for manual focusing, and only shot full HD. That was fine. That's not a problem. We didn't need 4K, and many people still don't. But the style of shooting video has definitely changed. The old school way where you set up a scene, and your actors or your talent and your props, and you worked out what was going to happen, and you focused where you knew the action was going to take place.
Yeah.
That's still how feature films are done. But we've got a whole new industry now based around vlogging and content creation where you can't shoot that way because very often you are the talent.
Yep.
You can't focus on where you're going to be because, you're not there to focus on. So you have to have a much more sophisticated autofocus that can follow you around, which is where mirrorless cameras have really just moved on to another plane, I think.
Yep. And I know many of you may disagree that video features are redundant or not necessary for modern digital cameras. And however, I know that most of you are photographers. That's why you're saying that. But for those who are in the video sector and or interested in making videos, for instance, you will definitely appreciate what modern mirrorless cameras is offering. And for a simple fact that you can now do this without having to fork out, tens of thousands of pounds, if not more, for proper cine cameras and cine lenses, because now you can use DSLR lenses, SLR lenses, mirrorless lenses. They're much cheaper by comparison. And then the technology itself is now definitely affordable compared to the old school way of doing things. Like you can buy for instance, a mechanical gimbal for a couple of £100, £300 at most, and the decent one. And in the old days, you would have to use a Steadicam, which costs you like 30, 40, 50,000 pounds, just to get a system in place to mount the camera on. And so you can now do things that you are aspiring to when you look at all these movies and things like that. You want to do the same thing. You can now almost achieve the same thing, almost, I'm saying, because ultimately, feature films are obviously still made differently, but you can almost have the same kind of look, same kind of feel by using a much cheaper and more affordable system. And in many cases, you can actually go as far as, I would say, that using a cheapo EM10, for instance, this is like a few £100. You can mount these like 45 1.8 will give you a nice shallow depth of field. You can film something, almost get that cinematic look. Where you got subject separations, you got a bokeh like kind of flickering behind the subjects, and giving a decent amount of light, and you get things. You can achieve something really special in just a few £100. It's not tens of thousands. So like you can really do a lot with these things these days. So I think video features may sound like a surplus for a lot of photographers, but don't forget that now cameras are kind of split in a way for both sides, videos and also photographers. And people who used to buy camcorders, they see camcorders no longer exist, right? And I know they still sell them. Canon still makes them, but I don't think they're selling well at all because people now can use their phone or use cameras now like this, and so it's very, very different.
Yeah, I think as well from a practical point of view that the development of video features does have advantages even if you don't shoot video. It's made autofocus systems much better. It's created a demand for better viewing systems, and faster sensor readout speeds, which helps with regular photography. It has improved cameras, and I think from a purely practical point of view, if it wasn't for video, we wouldn't get any new cameras at all, because I think the interest for camera makers in serving a stills photography market has diminished. And I think it's only this huge and burgeoning content creators market and video market which is driving camera development. So I think we probably had to accept we have to just kind of ride on the coattails of this video revolution and get from it what we can.
I totally agree. And because we all complain about rolling shutters, not just on video but also on stills. When people are talking about global shutter and things like that, these sort of technologies are actually relating to the speed of the readout speed of the sensor itself, and you know, if you have a traditional digital sensors and still sensors, and if you pan around using live mode, and then you will find rolling shutter quite significantly, and you're making it not practical to use. So that's why you still have to employ mechanical shutter when you do stills, if you do a lot of panning actions. But the faster the readout, the less of the rolling shutter will occur, and that means that as technology improve on the video side, because they don't like to see any sort of rolling shutters, and then that means in stills terms, we all benefit from it because the faster they are. That means the more silent shutter or electronic shutter mode that we can use when panning actions. And yeah, it's definitely, even CAF, like you said, and the continuous autofocus is a byproduct of how we push the system to do videos, because video is constantly focusing, and then because of that, we are kind of, as a photographer, we benefit from the improvement in the autofocus. It's purely from the video size, and that needed to push.
Yeah, definitely. We have got better cameras as a result. I know a lot of people. The funny thing was, on the magazines, which are mostly for print photographers, we not print photographers, stills photographers, we'd get subscribers saying, if you print a single page about video in that magazine, I'm cancelling my subscription. So it was deeply unpopular with the magazine readership, and I think probably there's still a certain amount of that now. But I think we have to be realistic and accept that even if our primary interest is stills photography, it's taken the demand for video to move cameras forward, and we do get some benefit from that.
Absolutely,
even if we never shoot a video.
No, we are enjoying whatever improvement we have, right? You know, I'm pretty sure everyone agrees.
Yeah.
So video aside, I know that this may not be the popular discussions because aforementioned all the reasons that we just talked about. But like we said, video is good because we are getting better cameras, like what said. So the next couple of things that we can just briefly touch base, because I think we kind of talked about it. Silent shooting is one of them, and the low light shooting, and silent shooting's no doubt, and mirrorless is definitely quieter because we can shoot purely electronic. You don't have to employ the mechanical shutter, so it's silent. And just a few days ago, excuse me, my client was saying that, are you taking a photo? Because I don't hear anything. So, and obviously he's not a photographer, so he doesn't know silent mode or any electronic shutters in the cameras these days. So he said he constantly asking me, have you taken a photo? I said, yes, I have. Yes, I have. It's really weird because I personally don't like electronic shutters that much, because I like the feedback. I like to have some sort of feedback. I know taking a photo. But these days, I like to use electronic shutters because it's quite discreet, and then I don't, and especially in a quiet room, I just don't want to keep hearing the shutters, and especially in a very echoey room, when you hear the shutter noise being bounced around, you can hear it quite loudly, basically. And so I shoot silent mode, and I do like it, but then at the same time, I don't like it because I prefer to have that physical feedback, like we just talked about earlier.
Well, it also confirms for you that you've got the exposure at the instant you wanted to get it, because timing is everything, I'm guessing, particularly for what you do. And you need that audible feedback to confirm to you that you timed it perfectly. Otherwise, you don't know whether the AF is finished.
Yep.
Because sometimes you will hunt a little, and you need to know. You need to know when the shot's been taken, don't you?
Yes,
it's
I
just
do.
a simple. But then, on the other hand, silent shooting. Can you imagine being on the what was that? I'm terrible for golf knowledge because I don't play. But what's the tournament they just finished? Is it in Georgia? A lot of drama on the final round. Can you imagine being on the 18th green, trying to photograph the key moments? You wouldn't have been allowed to. No, except that now you have an electronic shutter. The match point at Wimbledon, nobody could have used a traditional camera. Yeah. But now it's silent shutter. Things are possible that would never have been permitted before.
that's just
if any of us ever if any of us ever get to the point where we're photographing match point at Wimbledon.
Absolutely.
I think. But yeah, I find electronic shutters with no shutter sound quite confusing, because I've also used plenty of cameras where the AF has taken a moment to find focus. I need to know when it's done it and the shot's been taken. I don't want to have to wait for playback mode and think, is that it? Is that not it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we just have to get used to it. And, like sometimes when I use silent mode, I'll just wait for the green light to lit, on the focusing point to confirm.
Yeah.
And I know there are other settings you can do to minimize the confusions there, such as put focus priority, for instance. So the camera won't take a picture unless the focus is required. So you can set that, you can do the setting. Yeah. But sometimes in a professional world, you want speed. So like you don't want to wait for it. You want to make sure that it goes. Sometimes a little bit out of focus may not be as bad as you think, as long as you capture the moment. And so like in my case, I don't usually use the focus priority because that may slow me down or potentially miss the moment. So I don't do that. And in that case, I will check the green light if I can, and to be, basically ensure that that's in focus if I need to. The next thing that we're going to talk about fairly quickly is the low light shooting, which is actually very relevant and very important as well. And especially, we all know that Canon now have these massively popular f11 lenses.
Jenna, I had the 800 f11 in for review when I was doing one of the Canon cameras, and first time I'd used it, and I thought, when they came out, I thought, this is just stupid. What are they even thinking? And I put it on the camera, and it's like a regular lens. It's just as bright, focus just as quickly. Stabilization's a bit weird on an 800 because you basically go just dunk, 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 like that. But it worked fine. But the thing that struck me when I got this D800 was the lens isn't that fast. And if you're indoors, in average room lighting, you think, what the hell happened to the viewfinder? I can hardly see anything. And if we're going to keep this on a mirrorless DSLR thing, an 800 or a 600 f11 would be impossible on a DSLR. But turns out they're perfectly practical on an EOS RP camera, EOS R camera.
But wouldn't the EVF would overcompensate? Like you start seeing grainy noises in the EVF because in lower light.
I think the thing is, if you're shooting with an f11, you're not going to be in low light, are you? Probably. But no, you will see more noise. But I think I like to do a lot of night shots, especially when I'm traveling or on holiday. It's tricky with the DSLR because you can't see much. Who knew? Who knew? But with mirrorless, even if the viewfinder image is quite grainy, you can see what you're shooting. You can often see better in EVF than you can with the naked eye. And you can capture scenes with EVF viewing that you would just be guessing at with an optical viewfinder.
That is very true, because I remember in the old days, and when I had the 5D, the Canon 5D, and when I do some long exposure shots, I use some ND filters and grads, and so I use some 6-8 stop ND, solid ND, and then use some grads for the sky, and sometimes it's so dark that I think the camera struggled to focus. So what happened is I had to take out the filter, focus, manual focus, and then I put the filter back on to photograph, because otherwise, the camera would definitely struggle because there's not enough light to focus anything. But on the mirrorless side, it seems to be able to do it, even though it's a bit slower, than the normal, but because you are cutting a lot of lights out. But they still manage, and then like you said, you can still see. That's the main thing. You can still see what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the number of articles I read about big stoppers and big ND filters of blurring skies and rivers, and the first step was always meter and focus with the filter off, then put the filter on and shoot. But that's DSLR days. Now you just say put the filter on, see how you get on, probably be all right. But at the very least, you can still frame the shot, get your horizon level, make sure you've got things composed how you want to. You don't have to keep taking this filter in and out.
No, that is right. Another good thing about especially I would say, especially on Olympus, you got the live ND not live ND, the live
composite.
Live composite. That's
there is
it.
Live
composite.
ND.
No, live composite, because when you use a big stopper, and to do extreme long exposure shots. Sometimes you don't know the timing, and then
No.
if you can't, with live composite, you can actually see the image build up in front of it on the LCD screen, so you can stop
Yeah.
whenever you want to do it. And the magical thing is it will never overexpose the shot, so that's the brilliant thing, and so it's actually pretty cool.
It is, because the trouble with it, I think night photography is probably the same as landscape photography with a very very heavy ND filter. Normally, you have to wait for about a minute to find out you've messed it up because of the length of the exposure. It's about a minute before you can check what you shot. So
the amount of film that I wasted in the old film days for night photography is crazy.
Yeah, and you saying about that, I haven't tried the live ND filter yet. I do mean to, but I was with a guy who's shooting with a Phase 1. Phase 1 XT, massively expensive. I think it's about 50,000. And then you have to buy the lenses. But that's a similar thing. That's a kind of composite exposure mode, so it didn't need to use ND filters. It basically, you left it exposing the scene and stopped when it had enough, and it didn't overexpose. It simply composited all these shots into one as it went along. So you choose your base exposure, and then it just keeps on doing it, and you stop when you've just got the effect you want. And it's not related to exposure. It's a brilliant system.
It is. I think a lot of people don't, for those who haven't tried these sort of composite features on the Olympus camera, I mean, because I know that this almost exclusive on the Olympus cameras, and they don't have it on other Canon or Sony systems. And if you haven't tried that, you should try it, because it's actually very fun to do. And it's not just for nighttime, even like daytime as well. If you do that, and you should see how it goes, and because it's actually pretty cool. And let's do the final point before we wrap up today's talk. And this is a good one as well, because this is where mirrorless camera really excels, is the stabilization. And so yeah, go on.
You go first, Jimmy. Oh, all right. So for DSLRs, the two aspects of stabilization: you want the thing to be stable in the viewfinder, as well as stable on the sensor. So with the DSLR, the only system that makes sense is lens stabilization, because if you don't have that, even if you've got in-body stabilization, which was only ever Pentax, you don't know that the thing is stable. You've got no indication in the viewfinder, and the longer the lenses you're using, the more wobbly you get anyway. So lens stabilization makes most sense, I think, for DSLRs, but it has its limits. It's typically 4 stops, 5 stops in some instances, if you believe the specs. In-body stabilization is, I'm not going to say it's the future, it's just a different thing. But because with a mirrorless camera, you get the benefit of in-body stabilization in the viewfinder. And in-body stabilization has become more advanced than lens-based stabilization ever really was. So I think especially on smaller format cameras, it can be spectacularly effective. On full frame, some systems are better than others, to say the least. I won't go there. But I think the smaller the sensor, the better the stabilization, to the point where it becomes uncanny. I think you and I, Jimmy, probably both agree that Olympus is one of the best, but I've also shot with Panasonic GH6 and the GH5 II. For video, if you're not trying to do any camera movement, the stabilization for just a handheld static shot without any panning is uncanny. It's uncanny. You think, did I put that on a tripod? No, I didn't take a tripod. How is it that steady? It's uncanny.
It is, and I still, even today, not today, but like, even now, people still ask me about what sort of camera I use for making my videos, and did you put on the gimbal? Did you do this and that? I said, no, this is purely from the in-body stabilization from the Olympus cameras, and it's how good it is. From people who for the untrained eyes, they will just think that, oh wow, this is really stable. This is not shaky at all. This is like really almost like you're putting on a tripod, you put it on something, but in fact it's someone holding the camera filming something, and it's amazing how effective they are. But like you said, the smaller the format, the more effective it is, and that usually is the case, despite what manufacturer tells you that it's got 6-stop, 5-stop. If you look at the numbers, they look like they're all equivalent because they all have 5 stops, 6 stops, but then in reality, when you start using it, then you find out exactly what we mean.
Well, Canon said that the R6 II had up to 8 stops used alongside the RF 24 to 105 at 105 millimeters, which was unfortunate. So they sent me one of those as well, and I never got 8 stops, never got anything like it. I think I haven't used Panasonic's full frame stabilization enough to form a proper opinion. I thought Nikon's was quite good. And I've not mentioned another brand because that's the worst. But I don't want to knock anyone. But it's even the worst is better than not having any.
Yeah, of course,
definitely,
of course.
Definitely.
Like I said earlier, I don't think I could go back to non-stabilized camera, even though that
it's hard work.
It just makes me dizzy. And if I look at I might be too old for it, but every time I look at some unstabilized projections through the viewfinder, I find it very hard to adjust myself, and no matter how I stand, how I hold the camera, leaning on something, trying to stabilize myself, I don't know, maybe I'm just so used or spoiled by stabilizations and modern mirrorless cameras. I just find that non-stabilized viewing experience is not something that I'm looking forward to.
Well, it makes you nervous, doesn't it? Because
it does.
You think you're shooting in low light, shutter speeds are marginal. It might well be that you're going to get a sharp exposure, but if your viewfinder is all over the place,
but having said that, like if you want to learn about photography, you should start from the beginning, right? You should start with no stabilization whatsoever, so you get used to.
That's true.
You should actually get used to like learning the effect of shutter speed, because many people always when they photograph some subjects, and they always say, oh, I got a blur picture. But if you really look closer, it's either going to be the subject movement or actually the camera movement. That means your shutter speed is too low for that shot. You need to up the shutter speed. Because of stabilization, sometimes you forgot about that, because you're so used to these very stabilized projections through the viewfinder, you've completely forgot about the effect of shutter speed. And so this is something I think people still need to learn about that.
I think so, and I think the whole idea about safe shutter speeds, that's a bit dodgy anyway, because what's safe for one person isn't safe for another. So I'm absolutely rubbish at hand holding. If I didn't have any stabilization, I would have to double the shutter speed. So I'd have to double the shutter speed for the focal length. So the argument is, say if you had a 30mm lens, you should be safe at a 30th of a second. I wouldn't be. I'd only feel comfortable shooting at 1/60th. And maybe if it's blustery or I'm standing on one leg or something else weird was happening, I think maybe a 1/2/5. I don't like taking chances with blur. A lot of folk would rather take a chance on blur than high ISOs. I'll take high ISOs any day.
Well, these days you have pure raw to rescue you, so it doesn't really matter.
So it will. If you don't mind giant files, but
no, but it's true. I mean, I think that learning the relationship of shutter speed is very critical in the success of photography in long term. And I know we have the technologies now to alleviate a lot of the problems that we just mentioned, but at the same time, you can't defy physics, and then there's so many things you can do to make sure you can obtain a sharp picture, and stabilization is one way, but it only do so much for certain things, and you still have to understand when to deploy faster shutter speed for certain genre of photography or action. And obviously, if you want to deliberately have some motion blur, that's for artistic reason, that's a very different thing altogether. But if you want to freeze something, get a tack sharp shot without any movement, then you need to make sure that you either have enough light, enough shutter speed, or whatnot, everything like that. And stabilization only comes into a part of the equation, but not for everything. And this is something that I'm pretty sure that everyone would appreciate.
But yeah, so if just to bring it back to the whole mirrorless versus DSLR thing, if you migrate from a DSLR to mirrorless and you get all the benefits of IBIS and what have you, you might think, oh, whatever, big deal. But if you go back the other way to an older DSLR, you think, oh my gosh, yes, that stabilization does make a difference, and I'm not sure I like doing without it. I think mirrorless cameras, I think full frame, depending on the system, might be similar, and lens-based stabilization versus IBIS, who knows? But I think the best mirrorless systems have stabilization which far exceeds anything you can hope for from a DSLR. Doesn't mean you can't take pictures with the DSLR. It just changes the circumstances and the settings that you need.
Absolutely. Right, so this is it. We run through the whole list today, and it's definitely very enjoyable and very. I'm pretty sure a lot of you are getting quite active as well, especially at the beginning. So one final question before we end today's chat. I'm pretty sure everyone has the answers already. Which one has the future?
Don't. That was mean. That was mean.
Well, I'm not. Just technology is moving forward. It's not going to stop, and we all know the answer. So if you do enjoy SLRs, and my point is, if you do enjoy SLR experience, and if you can still afford one, get one of the DSLRs and SLRs, and for keepsakes, just to keep it around, for experience, for learning, and whatnot, anything. And I treasure my SLRs. You can see I've got a few, lying around, just like I showed you earlier. And I grew up with DSLRs and SLRs more specifically, and then a subsequently digital version of it. And so I want them. Not for shooting these days because I have my other system to use, and but every now and then I will use it just for nostalgic reasons, and just go out, have a fun, just almost like driving a classic car, just go out, and have a spin, just like, oh yeah, I remember this, and it's quite good. It's got a good feeling of it.
It's exactly like a classic car, and I think as well, it's not just about nostalgia. As products evolve and change, they often evolve and change in a good way, but you lose some things as well. And I think that the whole point of this discussion today is, I think we can probably all agree that mirrorless, mainly because the camera makers have decided, is the future. But at the same time, it would be wrong to say that everything about mirrorless cameras is better than DSLRs. It's simply that it's a better design overall, but it's not necessarily better in the specifics, and there might still be some people for whom the specifics of the DSLR design are more appealing. And if Leica can carry on making M series rangefinders probably 50 years after the DSLR made them obsolete, I'm sure DSLRs can keep going for a while longer.
Well,
because they work in a different way. They give a different experience, and people do want a different experience.
They do. Having said that, I think I talked to it before, Rod. Like Leica is about to release a rangefinder with EVF, not OVF. No, I wouldn't even call it a rangefinder anymore.
No, it's going to be Leica Q with interchangeable lenses.
Basically, or even more suitably saying it's almost like a Fujifilm X100 or the X Pro, because you can use the EVF feature in it. I'm not sure if Leica is making the right move. I know it's convenient, certainly for some people, and I'm not disagreeing. Don't put it the wrong way, and but it's just that you're losing that signature M rangefinder, or what rangefinder is about. It's about the optical focusing mechanisms, and then it's how you see things. So having a digital EVF on the Leica Leica M camera more specifically, I don't know, it's gonna ruin the experience a little bit for me. And it's a Q. Basically, it's a Q with interval changeable cameras, and then that's all it is. But anyway, besides the point, and let's end today's chat with one last comment from Stefan, and then he said, "Future is AI." Maybe this is something we should talk about in the future, and because you are right, AI is everywhere, and I personally think that it's overused at the moment. But we can talk about it in a separate chat altogether. And but have a couple of lines from you, Rod. What do you think about AI? I think that it is everywhere now, right? Everyone use AI. Everyone.
I was trying to think of a line I've used before. It's something like, what's the point in AI when people don't use enough of the ordinary salt? It's something like that.
I don't know.
I think AI and automation, they're disguising something simple, as if it's something complicated. Cameras. I think your comment about the Leica cameras are basically, you need shutter speed, choose the shutter speed, choose an aperture, and you focus. That's all they do. That's all they do. How have they got so complicated, and how have camera makers convinced everyone that those three things are so difficult? I don't know.
I have no idea. It's almost like, put it another way, if you don't know what a human looks like, why do you have human detections in autofocus? Do you have a problem of focusing a human, and in front of you?
I don't know, so I can't tell you.
Joking aside, this is another topic another day, and so we're going to end today's chat here. And thank you all for joining in, and thank you for all your comments. It's been really fun to read, and certainly we had a fun discussion today about DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. If you anything that you would like us to talk about in the next chat, and please do leave some comments after the today's chat in the comment section below. So until next time, maybe we should say goodbye now, and then I would see you all next time. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye, everyone.